Hey Running Gang, as you probably guessed, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself in this video. It's been a little while since I let you guys in on what's going on with me, and I figured now might be a good time with me developing my first instructional course. Think of it as a little introduction to the instructor. But I'm not just here to toot my own horn. I actually want to talk about something that's becoming a growing problem in the writing community and in the community of creators in general. But I'm going to do that through talking to you about my ebook, Strand. I've used it as an example in a lot of different videos. I figured now might be a good time to actually let you guys in on what it's about and kind of where I was coming from with this book. A little bit of insight into the author's mind, if you will. Through this, you can see that I actually practice a lot of the writing techniques that I teach. So let's talk about Strand, what the book is actually about, the way that the method I teach actually worked for me to write Strand. Of course, you're still going to be able to pick up a couple tips from what I'm going to talk about here, but today, giving pointers isn't the main focus. I've gotten comfortable sharing details of my story and talking about my work to other people, but that was a long damn road to get there. And that's something a lot of writers struggle with, building up that confidence to talk to people about your work, to let those ideas out of your brain. That's more what this is about. This might be a bit of a touchy topic for some, but it's the truth. We live in a consumer's world, not a creator's one. Things are starting to change for the better. It's taking a while. Through the advent of the internet, we hit a very interesting and unique time in human history. Musicians no longer need a recording studio or even instruments to create music. You don't need a DSLR camera or high-tech editing equipment to create quality photo and film. Likewise, anybody who can flap their fingers across a keyboard and click the big publish button at the end can call themselves an author. This is a welcome gift to the billions of people looking to be entertained through the ease of access of the internet. But there's a second edge to this blade. The market is saturated in every field, in every aspect. There are so many people making so much stuff all the time that it's becoming exceedingly hard for a new creator to make their content stand out amidst the ocean of things being created. And this has created a sort of backwards paradoxical thinking amongst not just writers, but a lot of creators in general. Although I have noticed it's considerably worse in the field of writing. Suddenly, we don't want others to succeed. It's not that we wish them ill, we just suddenly don't have the time to support one another. We're not gonna go out of our way to help anyone because there's so many of us all clamoring for the spotlight. We've lost our sense of community because that spotlight seems so crowded. You might never get into it. Here's the problem with that way of thinking. Picture popularity with your work as a physical stage. We all want to get up on that stage. But if we all run for it at once and that's all we do is try to claw our way on stage, we're just going to bump shoulders and create a big cluster and no one's actually going to get onto the stage. No one except the Stephen Kings and James Pattersons that got there first. But if we take the time to step aside and let someone else pass us every once in a while, or even give another creator that a little nudge, a little helping hand to get up onto the stage, then in the end, we all stand a greater chance at being at the holy grail of discovery. What I'm talking about is the stigma around self-promotion. Even just saying those words in some places on the internet can get you booted like a virtual bouncer is holding you up by your collar. I've seen it on successful writing websites, I've seen it on subreddits, on Facebook pages. Big, bold letters, no self-promotion. And to an extent, I really do get it. If we allowed anybody who knows how to type to plaster ads for their work anywhere, the internet might break from the sheer overload of information. That said, it's also really unhealthy to have this stigma against self-promotion in the creative world. Think about it. You're being urged not to talk about your work. And this is especially true in the writing community. Instead, these kind of underground, smaller creators, especially in the writing world, are told to basically keep it to yourself. This entire world, these characters, these storylines and interlocking subplots that you spend months, maybe even years on, you're supposed to just keep that to yourself. Don't talk about it because that's considered self-promotion. And if we all did that, the internet would break. I get that. But also, you need some kind of freedom to talk about what you've done, to be proud of it. I say self-promotion is fine on the appropriate avenues, but there are precious few avenues that even allow it right now. You should be heralded for sticking it through the incredibly difficult process of plotting, drafting, and actually editing and finishing a book, not told to keep it to yourself. But who, in their right mind, who already has success, is going to waste time representing the little guys? Well, that would be us, your fellow little guys. So I'm hoping to lead by example with this video. The comment section here is a safe space. My website is always a safe space. You can comment, ideas for your stories anywhere on my website. You can email me directly from my website, which is going to be in the link to the description. And on my Facebook page, if you want. Anywhere, any space that belongs to me on the internet, you are welcome to share your story ideas, to ask me questions, to just see what I think about something. I will tell you openly, and I'm glad to have my followers see your work. If they might enjoy it, why the hell not? That's the only way we're going to break through this literary constipation that we've fallen into as an internet culture, where so many voices are trying to scream over each other that you really can't tell what anyone is saying. For now, I'm going to talk about something pretty cool I made. A little story about a world inside a tower, right, wrong, necessity, and art. So what is Strand about? What I'm about to give you is called an elevator pitch. It's a book summarized in 30 seconds, which is about the time you'd have if you somehow managed to get yourself into an elevator with an agent or publisher to pitch them your book and get them interested. If you don't have an elevator pitch for your book, I highly recommend putting one together and memorizing it, so that if in the event you ever get into this situation or someone just asks you what your book's about, you have a memorized, quick, concise, and engaging response. Strand the Silver Radio follows Quincy, a young artist, as he travels the far reaches of humanity's last bastion, Strand's Great Tower. When Quincy's fate entwines with that of the beacon, the tower's artificial sun, Quincy decides he's had enough of Strand's plans for everyone's fate. The odds are stacked against him, an unaugmented youth in a world of biologically enhanced humans, so he'll need friends in low places, the lowest in the tower, as a matter of fact. In this perfectly programmed system, one off-script artist might just be the only thing that could paint Strand's world in a new light. It all began when a voice crackled through his dad's old radio. Just made it. But that concise description captures a lot of the first Strand book's primary themes, shows the unique setting, Strand's Tower. Just in this introductory statement, you get a good idea of what the protagonist is all about too. Just from the clues in this pitch, you get a sense that something has happened to the world, that humanity is only left in this last bastion, which is a giant tower. That it needs an artificial sun shows that it's completely cut off from the outside world. We're also introduced to the protagonist, Quincy. We learn here that he is somehow tied to this artificial sun, that he goes against Strand's rigid system, and that the person on the other end of his dad's radio has something to do with it. This pitch gives you enough to form an incomplete but engaging idea. It hooks you, it gives you enough information for you to want more, which is exactly what an elevator pitch should do. But you guys aren't agents and publishers, so I can give you a little bit more than that. Don't worry, I'm going to keep it spoiler-free for anyone who's downloaded it and not finished it yet, or those of you who are definitely going to download Strand after you finish watching this video. Link in the description. Strand is a story about transformations, but not the ones you might expect. Despite the intrigue around the history of the tower and what it does, the real beating heart of this story are its characters. Right from the beginning, you'll see that every person is just that, a person with multiple dimensions and flaws. There are things you're going to like about them. There are things they'll do that they can't take back. There are missed signals and truly unexpectedly heartfelt bonds. At the forefront of this is Quincy, and the links between people that he makes both on purpose and by accident. At the onset of the book, he clings to this friendship with a few fellow unsatisfied youths, Jess and Aaron. But later on, you'll see Quincy attempt reconciliation with an old friend of his, Leon, whose Strand system has worked out very well for. Then there's Ellie, Quincy's good-natured neighbor, who seems to take more interest in him the further his life plunges into chaos and despair. Later still, you'll see Quincy mixed in with a crowd of creative rejects like himself. With the addition of each new character, we see Strand's system and their tower in a completely different light from so many different perspectives that are all connected. And this really helps Quincy grow in character and understanding and form his own idea about this system that's so rigid that most people are never allowed to form their own idea. He gets to know pretty much everybody under Strand's monumental boot, which helps him decide who he's going to stand with in the end. Throughout the story, readers have told me they find themselves really bonding with Quincy because he's not a textbook hero. There's no secret power, there's no overnight training montage where suddenly he has what he needs to overcome every obstacle. This makes Quincy a realistic, problem-solving machine, and someone who really struggles with things. Intellectually, physically, morally. I mean, he's pitted against these opponents who are all augmented in some way, enhanced. He's doing something hard and damn it, does he struggle against trials like the brutal environments of the less civilized part of the tower, and antagonists like the Bolt Ranger Christoph Rains, General Phineas Bragg Boneblade, whose skeleton does exactly what it sounds like. But the struggle illustrates the power of creativity, of being genuinely yourself, and so the hidden power that we all have. Quincy represents the changing mind, the maturing creative, and the power of the individual. That is what Strand is about, without spoilers, along with badass augmentation, unique world, and heart-wrenching, bittersweet resolutions. Let's go talk about the writing process I use in action. Again, avoiding spoilers. If you don't want to know how the book starts, you may want to skip this section, but I'm talking like the first 500 words. If you've seen my video where I talk about making the plan before you start writing, you already know the process I use. Click the card up here to watch that video and learn a little bit about plotting versus pantsing, or what I do, which I consider somewhere in the middle. I connect the dots. In other words, I plan the beginning of my story, how it's going to end, one major crossroads in the middle, and then I write my way from one point to the next. Here's the proof that I actually stand by what I teach. Here are the big 3 events that I first planned when I originally outlined the concept of Strand. I knew I wanted to start the book with Quincy and a couple fellow undesirables doing some minor mischief. I knew I also wanted to have Strand respond to this with heavy force, showcasing the kind of technology that they have at their disposal, as well as their kind of militaristic stance on what is and isn't acceptable, even for young adults. Hence, the first chapter of Strand the Silver Radio. Quick but insightful dive into the tower shows, right at the onset, an elite Strand military group called Bolt Rangers literally swooping in from the sky to stop a couple teenagers from doing some elaborate graffiti. This gives the reader some insight into not just the skill of the protagonist, but his attitude towards the government, strictness of his world, and augmentation technology right away. Because Bolt Rangers have those augments, the steel wings in their arms that allow them to glide. The next part in my connect the dots process is to figure out how the story is going to conclude, at least loosely. That way you don't contradict yourself when you're writing the middle section, and you can always tweak the ending if you come up with something a little bit better when you get to the end. I actually did this with the first Strand book by adding a couple scenes to give you a kind of wrap up of the story and give a little insight into the conflict of the next book. So for the main feature of this ending, spoiler free, I knew that I wanted to have a physical confrontation, something that would show Quincy bringing together that creative nature he's held on to all this time, along with the experience and training that he's gotten over his hard journey across the tower. I also knew who I wanted waiting there to represent the opposition at the end of Quincy's hard road through the first book. So I knew who to include confrontations and interactions with throughout the book, and who to make sympathetic so that this final conflict would really pull the heartstrings. I also wanted to see Quincy weigh a heavy decision and make a hard choice, something that Quincy at the beginning of the book couldn't have handled. With my beginning and ending in mind, a couple midpoints started to jump out at me throughout the story. Since I knew who was going to stand in Quincy's way at the end, I knew who to pepper in interactions with throughout the book. I also had a couple locations in mind to show more of Strand's world inside the tower. I knew I wanted to show a couple suburban environments to illustrate what life was like for the middle class in Strand's tower. I also knew I wanted some starkly different, more wild environments that the lower class live in the tower. Places to show how creativity thrives, and places where Strand's grip is weakened. Places like Silverreach, a city built entirely from washed up scrap from a river, or the mountainside village of the Avalon tribes, or a harbor called the Legs, where all of these cultures kind of come together to have a big party. So with all of that in mind, I hit the keyboard and my fingers just kind of knew where to go. As I describe in my other video talking about creating the plan, if you have a beginning, an end, and at least one major crossroads in the middle in mind, there are only finite paths your characters can take to hit all 3 of those. Well, that's my little self-promotion plug for my first ebook, Strand the Silver Radio. Towers, augments, artists, more twists than a club in the 60s, and a broken heart to be thankful for. And you know what? After reading and rereading this book almost 6 times in my own self-editing process, before I even pass it off to someone else, I can confidently say that I'm really proud of it. I'm happy with how it turned out. And that's not something I've ever been able to say about my writing in the past. Like most writers, I've always been my biggest critic, constantly feeling the need to tweak and revise and putting off showing it to anyone because it could be better. It can't possibly be good enough yet. Not this time. And this isn't just because the quality of my writing has improved. It's because I'm not as scared. I took the plunge, clicked publish, it was done. The book is out there, and you know what? The people that have read it actually really like it. And if you feel that way, kind of scared, because what if you tell someone about your book and they ask too many questions and then they don't think your idea is good? Stop you right there. Any story has the potential to be great in its best form, and almost no stories achieve that best form in a first draft. So if you never get past that first stage of, okay, I wrote a book, it's time to let someone read it, you'll never get feedback. You may never get to the second or even the coveted final draft. Remember, you're welcome to leave comments of your work in progress, your story, any ideas you have. Leave them in this video, send them to me in an email through my website, or leave them in a comment on a blog post on my website. Any web space I own is a safe place for you to share ideas about your story. If you're suffering from some creative anxiety about your first big story, please leave a comment or message me privately at my website through the link in the description. Tell me about your story. Or if you're not quite ready for that, tell me why. Why aren't you ready? What's stopping you? Maybe I can help, because like all writers, I went through it too. Thanks for watching, guys. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You can support me by subscribing to my website, like I've mentioned many times in the link in the description. Also by becoming a patron, which is going to be a separate link in the description. Subscribe to the website to make sure you get updates about the course coming soon. The basics of plotting a novel. Now introducing the newest addition to our furry family, Sage. Roadside Writer. Out.